Welcome to A Side of Science.
With Stacey and Ant, because every story has a side of science.
On this episode, we're talking about Netflix and data.
So, Stacey, what's your hook?
Did you know that thumbnails are personalised for every individual on your Netflix account?
Really?
Really. Guess what?
What, Stace?
So I was watching Netflix recently, and my husband and I, we have a subscription with different profiles. So he has a profile and I have a profile.
Naturally, because you don't want to be getting your preferred shows mixed up. There's nothing worse than when someone else searches a show on your account.
Except we almost always use his account. It's actually quite rare for me to go into my account.
Okay, I see how this works.
Yeah, but I did this recently, and I noticed that similar shows, or the same shows that were recommended, but I wasn't recognising them at first because the thumbnails are different. On my subscription, on my profile,
so the same show that both you and Neil watch have different thumbnails, the little picture that you click on are completely different for both of you.
Yep, in our recommended shows. So I'll give you an example, like Good Will Hunting.
Yep. Great movie.
Great movie. Okay, you can imagine the characters and you know the plot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a love scene, we've got a professor. Yeah. So on mine, you'll find this amusing, but I'll get the love scene, the couple.
Of course, naturally. Yeah,
Right.
Matt Damon.
Yeah, whereas Neil will watch more comedies on his profile. So he's got Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, Will Robbins.
Yeah, he gets Robin Williams on his profile.
Okay.
So same show, but marketed uniquely to each of us.
So what you're saying is that Netflix personalises things, does it?
It knows what I want. It knows me.
It knows exactly what you want, and that's Matt Damon in a love scene.
Yeah, that's nailed it. Yes. Yeah.
So what you do about it?
Well, I went looking at how they do it
Very good.
and why they do it. If you're I found that it takes about 90 seconds for you to get fed up of Netflix. So you go in, you try and look for something. If you haven't found something within 90 seconds, on average, that's it, you're done. You'll go to Foxtel or Binge or somewhere else.
You'll go back in time to the year 2000 and find
I
Foxtel.
watch Foxtel. Haven't got KO yet.
So 90 seconds, I reckon, to catch your attention.
Yeah, and 1.8 seconds on a thumbnail. So it has to speak to you.
So that thumbnail, so when you log into Netflix, when you open it, something's got to pop up within 90 seconds.
Yep.
And you got to go to it and go, yeah.
I want that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I reckon you're gone.
Yeah, I guess you get decision fatigue. There's too much there, too much, and you leave.
Okay, so where does this all start? How does Netflix do this, Stace? What is the science behind this?
Well, I was hoping you'd tell me about the data.
Oh, well, this is great, because when you came to me with this idea, I didn't know this, and I found it fascinating. And when Stace came to me and said, hey, Ant, I want you to go look up some data, well, as a former engineer with a degree in computer science, my first thought was stop talking dirty to me.
Talk data to me.
Let's go. Love it. So, how does Netflix do this? Well, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that Netflix collects data on you. Some of the data they tell us that they collect about us. And this is the stuff they tell us.
Okay.
This is me with my tinfoil hat again. But they collect normal stuff like how long you watch a video for, your viewing history, how you rated titles if you ever do that. I don't think I've ever done that. They also look at other people who have similar tastes as you, but they even look at really cool things like how long you hover over a title, how many times you paused and rewound that Matt Damon scene in Good Will Hunting. If you resumed after watching it, did you go past episode 1? They collect a lot of data on you. Even the device you watched on, the number of searches, what you search for. What do they do with this data, Stace? Do you know?
Well, I know. Well, I could see how they could then use it to make thumbnails.
They can definitely make thumbnails, but they do a lot more than that. Everyone does this. The way Netflix does it is everyone creates a profile of you based on your data. And this is anybody who owns an iPhone or any sort of smartphone knows about profiles and collecting data. But why does Netflix collect all this data? Well, as you said, they've worked out that they've got about 90 seconds to hold your attention.
Yep.
But they do more than that. They use this data to work out what to create. Netflix creates content as well. They got their own Netflix branded movies, shows and stuff. And some of these episodes, like Stranger Things or The Crown, have multi-million-dollar per episode budgets.
Yeah.
So if you're going to output that much money, you need some sort of guarantee that people are going to like it. So Netflix first looks at this data and goes, well, what do people want? What do people in this category want? What do people in this category want? What does people as a whole want?
That's how House of Cards came about. I think that was the first Netflix.
Yeah.
So they
With He
found...
Who Shall Not Be Named.
Well, that one... he was actually quite popular in a lot of
Yeah.
shows. A lot
He
of
was
people were
big.
watching Kevin Spacey shows. They were
Yeah.
also watching... Am I allowed to say his name? Whoops. They were also watching a lot of political shows.
Okay. And
Put two and two together, you get House of Cards, and
it was huge.
Successful.
Like, I was watching it. Everybody was watching it.
I haven't seen it.
The cool thing is Netflix reckon that based on the data, they can be successful about 93% of the time with their original content compared to about 35% of the time for normal TV. So normal TV's got your old standard approach of, we kind of know what people want, but we'll make it and we'll see if they like it. They also reckon they've got about a 90% chance of making you at least click on the show or watch the first episode based on the profile they've made of you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you always want the same thing. But I'll go a bit more into the detail and we'll come back to that after. So how does this Netflix algorithm do it? Well, they have a very, very powerful machine learning algorithm. And to explain it simply for anybody who doesn't know what machine learning, every time you watch something, it's like showing a toddler a picture of an animal and saying, look at this animal. This is a bear. This is a dog. This has 4 legs. This has 2 legs. And the little kid learns, look at all these animals with 4 legs. Look at all these animals with 2 legs. Oh, you really like animals with feathers and wings and 2 legs. Cool. Every time you show me one of those, I'm going to keep giving you more. And so that's essentially what Netflix's algorithm does with all your data. And it does it in a couple of really cool ways. The first one is called collaborative filtering. And that's where Netflix recommends you content by analyzing the patterns in the user's behavior. So it's not looking at what you're actually watching. It's looking at kind of what you watched compared to what other people watched. And so it groups people with similar tastes.
Who's in my group, I wonder?
Oh,
Just cool people.
so collaborative filtering goes, we're going to find groups of people that
Yep.
all watch the same thing. And that's going to be a way that we can work out what Stacey wants to watch next. So look at all these other people that like to watch sex scenes of Matt Damon. I think Stacey's
too
going to love
far.
this movie.
Yeah, so that's kind of how the thumbnails work.
Yeah.
Because they can then see patterns. So faces do really well.
Yep.
More than 3 people on a thumbnail, no, doesn't perform. But if you
Really?
have one face, and you'll notice that a lot of the thumbnails are one face, that sort of speaks to
What's
facial recognition.
the science behind that?
We're wired to see faces, and then once you see a face, your amygdala will often be fired up. You'll have an emotional connection to that, and then you're in.
What's the amygdala for people like me that don't do more than 3 syllables?
It's in the brain, and it's responsible for your emotions, controlling
okay.
emotions.
So Netflix knows this.
They're using neuroscience, yeah,
It's the
and
prehistoric
psychology.
part of your brain that goes, ooh, I like that face, as opposed to just a random scene.
It gives you that emotional connection where
Yep.
you want to buy in. Most of the time, too, you'll know the character. So,
Yep.
for example, back to whether it's Robin Williams or Matt Damon. So I automatically, there's a halo effect around them showing me a different movie with Matt Damon.
Yep.
And then I'm wired to want to click on that and watch it. Might not just be the faces too. They can use, so you've got to set up an expectation. They can't just give you all the movies with Matt Damon and you'll like every one of them.
Correct.
So they have to set up these expectations, and so they can do that using colour or so reds or greens as high energy, and like a noir shadows that's more mysterious. So you have a bit of a taste for what's going to happen, and then once those expectations are set, that's what you're going to find
So
in them.
it's really interesting because Netflix collects all this data. Netflix also tests this. It does things like A/B testing where it'll go, we'll create a few different versions of what our front page looks like and we'll send them out to different groups of people and we'll say which ones work really well, which ones don't. It does collaborative filtering, which is looking at groups of people and what they like and trying to group people into categories so they could market to groups and say, well, the rest of your group, Stacey, really loved not just Matt Damon films, but also Ben Affleck films. And so it's like, you might like this Ben Affleck film, right? But it also does content-based filtering, which is looking at actually what is the movie, what's inside it, what type of thumbnails appealed to other people in your group, ratings, characters, plots, genres, all that stuff.
They took, in looking at that as well, like the actual content, they used to use just your old school DVD covers, whereas they stopped doing that in about 2016 and created these thumbnails. One, because they can target you. It's precision targeting.
Yep.
And the other reason they thought that it didn't work is, you've got that 90 seconds. So they need to make an impact and an impression. So something like Stranger Things, they'll use screen grabs. There's an hour-long episode, and that might give them 87,000 screen grabs. And so then they will each tag the screen grab with saliency, colour, faces, skin tone. Saliency is how prominent something is.
Okay.
And then they can work out, okay, well, if that's an action, I'm gonna target Ant with that particular screen grab, whereas I'll target Stacey with the romantic screen grab. Same show.
We know they do screen grabs now, but they actually use the data more than that. It's not just, we're going to give you a screen grab. It's everything you see on the front page. The genres that it recommends you, you know how you can scroll across in each genre, the order that they appear in, how long you hover over them.
Yep.
They're all personalized to try and get you to click in. And that's all based on the data that they've collected from you and this profile that they build. And they reckon that after about 2 weeks of regular use, they've got a fairly accurate profile. So this machine learning algorithm picks up on your patterns and stuff, and it uses it uses a lot of things. One of them is K-clustering, which is kind of like if you went to the supermarket and you bring home all your groceries, and when you're unpacking them, you sorted them into different categories. And you said, well, I'm going to put snacks here, veggies here, cold foods there. But then you looked at your groups and you're like, oh, that's not a very good way to organise them. Let's try categorising them another way. Let's do it by colour. Let's put the green foods here, red, blue, orange, yellow. Oh, actually, that's not a good way. Let's do it by packaging, or let's do it by liquids, solids, gases. So K-clustering is where Netflix's really advanced algorithm will do this over and over and over and over again until it finds the best way to categorize you so that you are in a really accurate group. For example, it will do this with your collaborative and your content-based filtering.
Yep.
So it knows that, actually, I've got Stacey pinned. Everybody else in Stacey's little group really loves Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. So I know exactly what to give Stacey and everybody else in the group. It can also kind of fill in gaps based on things you've never watched before. It goes, well, based on everybody else in your group, you might actually like this new show.
That's the same with the thumbnails. So they can so your machine learning shows you, okay, well, this person's watched the rom-coms, we'll target them with rom-coms. But when you do the K-clustering, you get patterns that you wouldn't ordinarily see.
Correct.
And so then they can start to say, okay, well, those that like this usually like sci-fi, and sci-fi colours that do well are neons. And if we use those kind of colours and the screen grabs, then they're more likely to watch this. And so they'll target that group with that.
Well, that's the thing to highlight here is that there's not a person looking through your profile, looking at every single data point.
Don't ruin it for me.
Making the connection in an Excel spreadsheet. The algorithm is really advanced, and it does it by itself, and it learns. It gets better with the more data points you give it. So it develops a really accurate picture of you. But what happens when the algorithm goes wrong? So Netflix claim they don't take or they don't have any data on your gender or your race or anything like that. This is what they claim. But there was a really interesting phenomenon in 2021 where it kind of went viral for a movie called Set It Up, which I've never seen.
I think I heard about this.
But people online noticed that they were getting different little thumbnails for it.
Yep.
Now, Set It Up, I did a brief look into it. The main characters are white. But people noticed that if they were black, they were getting thumbnails that had mainly black characters on it, trying to get them to click. And they'd click into the movie and go, this isn't about a black character at all. This isn't even a main character. This is just like happened to be a black guy in the movie.
Yeah.
And so people started getting really suspicious. Like, we understand the algorithm is quite good at painting a profile, and the whole job of the algorithm is to get us to click. But this isn't just recommending me things I'd like anymore. This is just basically using part of my preference to get me to click into something that I would ordinarily wouldn't even watch. So what have we learned today, Stacey?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Netflix is able to use science, technology, engineering, and art to then curate my experience. But it's got me not necessarily trusting my own instincts, like I'm being fed something rather than actually choosing something.
I'm kind of the same. So I think, in a way, the personalisation is great because sometimes you want to watch something that's similar.
Yeah.
I like sci-fi. I do want to see what other sci-fi movies are out there. But I think it does get predatory when it starts to get a bit too smart, this, machine learning algorithm.
Yeah.
And my tinfoil hat goes, is that the only data they're collecting on us? What else are they collecting?
Yeah.
I'm always suspicious. And I suppose from a user point of view, there are lots of shows that I haven't watched in years. And sometimes I want to go back and I just want to find a show that I've never seen before, something new. And I just keep getting the same things fired at me, and then I...
Which means that you're not really breaking out of your comfort zone to watch something that might teach you something or that you might like for a completely different reason. You're not actually, tasting anything different. So that could get a bit monotonous after a while.
Yeah. So Netflix, the algorithm, amazing, incredible piece of technology, and the way I had no idea, very clever. Very clever the way it personalizes
Manipulates.
us all. Yeah, manipulates us all into clicking.
Yeah.
But I think it can go too far, and I think occasionally we all need a break from it.
Well said. How would you use this in a classroom sense or in an education setting,
Well,
Mr. Education?
I taught maths and physics and science mainly. And because I'm a gigantic nerd, the part that my ears pricked up at is one of the parts I didn't actually go into too much detail today because it starts to get a bit too, let's just say, nerdy. But it's another thing they do called matrix factorization.
Yeah, you lost me.
Well, if you're a Year 10 math teacher or general maths and you'll have to teach matrices to students, which they do, every student I've ever taught will go, "Sir, when am I ever going to use this stuff?" Well, guess what? Matrix factorization is something that Netflix's algorithm does to find underlying patterns in the data profile of users and stuff. It basically takes a very large matrix, and a matrix is just like an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
And it breaks it up into smaller matrices, which can then find underlying patterns. And if you multiply these smaller matrices back together, you'd get the big matrix. That's a simple explanation. But I thought, hey, there's an actual real practical way that this matrices that we teach gets used, not just in some weird, boring engineering.
Something that they use or are familiar with at least.
The kids will understand that. You
Yeah.
go, Netflix uses this to target you better so that it can find you programs that you like.
Good context.
More anime for your Year 10 class. What did you think?
Yeah, there was a couple of things that I thought about. The first one is I started to look into data for data processing and kind of showing kids how if you process data differently, you can reach different conclusions.
And this is how you came across it, right?
This is how I knew about Wednesday, people clicking in and kind of
and not
disappearing,
coming back.
not coming back.
So that's how Wednesday comes across as the most watched show,
It's
right?
the most watched show in September 2024, yeah.
But
if you then look at views versus runtime versus how long people actually spend watching it, so 3 graphs, and then cutting the graphs or cutting the data a different way to show views per watch time,
okay.
then we've got, in your first graph, Wednesday is the number one. In the second graph, more people watched Stranger Things.
Yeah.
They spent longer watching it.
They spent longer. So what you're saying, I think, is that more people clicked into Wednesday
Yep.
to begin with, but more people spent
More
total time
Yep.
watching Stranger Things. So the people who watched Stranger Things watched the entire series.
They either binged watched it or
Yep.
watched a lot
so
longer.
they said, like me,
Yeah.
I watched the entire of the
Did
last
you?
season in about a week.
Haven't
Because it's
seen it.
great. Great show.
And so then by using the runtime versus how long people spent watching it, actually Wednesday was the third performer. So you had Stranger Things came out on
Yep.
top, then Bridgerton,
Bridgerton. I watched the season of that.
and then haven't seen it.
Yeah,
And
that destroyed my algorithm for a while.
and then Wednesday. So really good way, I guess, to actually get kids looking at data and
At
different ways to
data.
process data using something that they're familiar with.
One of your key
hopefully
science
interested
skills is
in.
processing and analysing data. The other big one I found when I was researching this is the psychology behind it. Netflix understands the psychology of the human brain
And the
really
neuroscience,
well,
yeah.
as all the big tech companies do. And they take advantage of it as best they can to get us to keep clicking.
Absolutely.
So I think those are really cool ways that you can bring the science of Netflix.
The other one is
into
the art.
classroom.
The art for
Ooh,
the thumbnails,
art.
because
Yeah.
they found that saturation of images and particular genres did work or didn't work. So, for example, military based genres
Yeah.
that are highly saturated
My
with like
jam.
a shadow.
Oh,
over the top,
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't
yeah.
perform well.
Oh, so
yeah,
what are they like?
It just doesn't work. Well, usually you need to be able to see someone's face for that emotional connection.
Yeah.
So you don't want.
So
the,
you don't want to do the whole saturation. I'm going to go home.
But you do want high contrast. So yeah, it's interesting. So there's a lot of art in there too.
Okay. So art, psychology, maths, science, Netflix.
Netflix. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. Good chat, Stace.
Good chat. Thanks.